Sure. There's the bill. Moved and seconded. Page 1. Nothing to see here. Page 2. Am I?
Mr. Chairman.
Representative Lean.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't know where we're at with it, but we asked earlier about potential language on this bill so that the voters know they're voting for a 2% consumption tax in lieu of their property taxes. So has that amendment been formally introduced? Do we have that language? Can we see where we're at?
It has been formally introduced and passed, and we're working on the mechanics of how to get it in there. Am I right, Josh?
So, Mr. Chairman, yeah, I don't know if I have specific language to offer at this point on where best to insert that. So if you did want that as an amendment, we might need to do it a little more conceptual to make sure we get it in the right place. I don't think I'm prepared right now to do specific language for that, Mr. Chairman.
I'd like to get it done. I think that'll be a good plan ahead. As soon as you get close, just send it out to everybody in the committee.
Pass that amendment.
We did.
Mr. Chairman, do we anticipate that to be today, that he has that language, or later today? I don't want to necessarily vote on this until I have that amendment.
Go ahead, Bob.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To try to help answer Representative Lean's question, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Chairman, co-chairman, we can probably make amendment to a conceptual 2% sales tax into this bill. Would I be correct? And we get that drafted from with that, we'd have to make an amendment to do that. Is that right?
So correct, Mr. Chairman. So the bill would need an amendment to add that language in. I can try to work on something as you're discussing if you want something quicker, but I don't have that available right now. So you could do it as a conceptual amendment to make sure it's in there, or if you want to wait for specific language, it'll take me a few minutes, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Lean, is that acceptable?
Mr. Chairman, my preference would be that we wait till later in the day and just see what that language looks like, but it's your committee, you decide what you want us to do.
Co-Chairman Locke.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and let me just ask the question. We're not, this amending language into this bill, this is the resolution, right? So we're not amending language into the, I assume we're not amending language into the Constitution that has anything to do with 2 pennies. Can somebody clarify that for me?
I think where I'm at on this, and please, anybody correct me if I'm wrong,
Yeah, go ahead.
but we passed the 2% as a trigger bill for this.
We did that in the last.
Right? So that's in place already.
We just need to move it into.
Mr. Chairman?
Representative Lean.
Thank you, sir. So I just want to make sure that what I'm voting on is what I understand is going to go before the voters. I understand that we have that trigger bill that will be coming out of the committee to also be working through the process at the same time. I just want the voters to understand what it means when they receive a 0% residential property tax on the ballot. This is where I stem from. The Amendment A came with some very vague language, and it was sold as a property tax reduction, and that didn't happen ultimately at the end of the day. It's done essentially nothing at this point. And so I want to make sure that the voters have a very clear understanding this is the opportunity before you, and this is how it will be funded.
Mr. Chairman,
Representative Stivar.
for clarification, that amendment would go in section 2 of this bill, under the Secretary of State shall endorse the following statements on the proposed amendment. That's where that 2% would go. So how that's put in there is up to the LSO staff. Correct?
Representative Riggins, then Senator Case. Okay, Senator Case.
Mr. Chairman, the ballot language is supposed to relate to the bill. And if the 2% is not in the Constitution, I'm not sure you would put it in the ballot language. Do you see what my point is? You're telling people with ballot language that something's going to happen, but what actually happens is the language that they changed in the Constitution. And so that is problematic in my mind. You got to have that language, and the courts will rule that that language has to relate to the bill. You can't add like a sidebar.
Representative Riggins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That section 2 in the paragraph right below that, is that something that would be incorporated directly into the ballot measure? Or is that just simply describing what has to happen and then that later on would be eliminated? If that's just describing what has to happen, I think maybe you could insert that as information maybe.
Senator Ide.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would agree with Representative Riggins in there, because that section 2 is really just the statement that would be made on the ballot. And it's really not a constitutional change. It kind of ties into the trigger that we've already voted on. Yeah. So go ahead, maybe LSO can fill us in a little bit.
So, Mr. Chairman, generally that ballot statement, is to reflect the constitutional change that is being made. So I don't know how much additional language we could put on there that's outside of that, of what we're actually doing to the Constitution, because that's what's being voted on by the voters. So it's intended to kind of describe, pretty exactly what change is being made to the Constitution.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Anderson, my question is, do we actually have to put in the percentage or the fact that we're going to a sales tax? If we go in with a percentage, then we're looking at amending the Constitution if we need to change that.
And Mr. Chairman, that was some of the language I was going to try to work on over here, but I agree. I think it would maybe inadvisable to put a specific percentage in there. But so that's part of the reason was wanting to take a little time with this language, Mr. Chairman.
I definitely agree.
Do we want to, can we back down and talk about this later and give time, or how do you want to work it?
Well, we're not gonna have time. Do you think? That shouldn't be a time.
Yeah.
Okay, page 2. Anybody have anything to add? Page 3. Representative Lean.
Mr. Chairman, I just would like to ask Senator Ide if he was going to make a motion to make this owner occupied. He alluded to that earlier, but I didn't know if that was an intentional or just a thought process for the public.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At this point, if somebody else wants to make that amendment, I'm not going to make it. Thank you.
Guess we'll vote. I guess we won't vote. We're gonna wait for Eve to get back.
Mr. Chairman?
Senator Wright,
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'm just thinking if we want to give Josh a little bit more time, so if we want to try, if legally we can incorporate that into this resolution, that we go ahead and try to get it in there at this point. And if we can't, we can't, but I think it's worth waiting to see what he comes up with there before we vote on the bill. Personal opinion.
feel any pressure, Josh? I think we're okay to vote on this.
There's Riggins has got.
Representative Riggins.
So if I was to offer amendment to that bottom of that thing, I would amend to read as furthermore, the adoption of this amendment will impose a 2-cent sales tax as described in WS blah, 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 wherever that exists in statute.
But would not be in the constitutional amendment.
Oh, it'd be a,
I think,
I would vote to strike it down and strike it out when we actually debate it in the session.
I think the point's been made, if we put that 2% in the Constitution, in order to change it, we gotta do another constitutional amendment. And this has been so fun.
What, Mr. Chairman,
Yeah, we can stay.
the last constitutional amendment had that people voted to create another tier according to the way the legislature did it. They gave, they said the legislature would be able to create a new class. I mean, you can kind of handle it that way too, and say the legislature may eliminate property taxes and make them up with sales tax, sales or other taxes. You could do something like that.
Comments?
I need more coffee to think about.
I could do brain surgery too, but I doubt it.
We'd probably be just as good at brain surgery as we are at this.
No, it could be.
I think we vote. I think we're covered.
I don't know.
Can we do the next bill on the agenda, or is that not kosher? And then come back to this?
Yeah, we can do that.
I don't know if we can, I was just thinking.
We're gonna do it anyway. Okay, why, Josh looks at potential amendment language, why don't we move on to 99 and get through that first?
Mr. Chairman, I would make a motion to move the bill. 99.
Do we have a second? 99 has been moved and seconded. Did. Okay. Page 1. Mr. Co-Chair.
I'll probably make these amendments maybe as a little bit more of as a group. There's several items, so maybe I'll do them all in a bulk. Is that okay?
That's fine.
You want me to start with that? there's a few amendments, and Mr. Anderson, if you maybe don't mind helping me wrangle these a little bit. Was a proposed amendment, and I want to make a couple of adjustments to this a little bit. But one of the amendments in here, there's a few changes. I know there was a change to page 1, line 1, after taxation, insert specifying the application of property tax exemptions, clarifying the application of property tax exemptions for long-term homeowners. And that's on the sheet that I think everybody has. Page 1, line 7, there's just some insert and renumbering necessary where there's an insertion there, and you guys will see that on your page. I won't read that. Then I think there's a change to, let's see here, section, I believe, let me look at the bill and just make sure I'm talking to the right portions of this. I'm on the wrong bill, of course, but it'll give me a moment. So basically the attached exemption, or excuse me, the attached amendment would kind of go in as you see it here on the page, and hopefully people in the room have a copy of that as well. The one change I would like to make to this, and there's some changes in here. For example, there's some changes in the wording in what's added under 3911-105 under the exemption. The modification there at the bottom where you guys see paragraph A, where it talks about used as a primary residence by the owner in the immediately preceding calendar year. I would like to modify that amendment a little bit, and Mr. Anderson, I just need your help. The objective of that's going in the right direction, but what we were really trying to do, and the problem we were trying to solve from the last meeting, was the fact that we have this scenario where the exemption is tied to the house versus the person. And we were trying to come up with some language that made it clear. For example, my goal with that, to change that language, and I'm asking for some assistance there, was to be able to say the exemption is available to a person who lived in a primary residence in Wyoming in the previous year for 8 months. And I probably didn't read that perfectly. But that basically makes the person qualify for the exemption, whether so for example, let's say you sold your home halfway through the year, right? The objective here was to make sure that because you lived in 2 different houses in Wyoming for 6 months, you wouldn't qualify for the 8 months, I believe. And so this was an attempt to resolve that issue. And I just wanted that language changed or modified to make sure we cover that. So, Mr. Anderson, whether you have that language, and I would love to have a conversation, but this attachment is basically my amendment with that modification to the language in what you see there as paragraph A. Just about a little over, just short of halfway from the top is that bottom. I would like that language to cover, because the objective here, because we've had this happen within the state, and this was discussed in the last meeting, where a person sold the house, and because of that, it stuck to the house rather than the person. But what are we really trying to do with this bill? We're trying to make sure that this exemption sticks to the person who lives in the house, or lives in the state, is a resident of the state, and it doesn't matter if they lived in 1 home or 2 homes, because to get the exemption, they very well could have lived in several homes. So that was what I'd like that language to be modified to reflect. And then the other, I think, significant issue here, and I think Assessor Huxtable had mentioned the adjustment of the date to March 1st, that was requested for the assessors. And then the language at the bottom, I believe, was also kind of an assessor recommendation. That one is a little less clear to me, but I would like to basically add this amendment kind of as you see it here, with that additional change to the language in paragraph 3911-105A and I won't even try to get that Romanet and large A section in that paragraph. I just want to change it the way I described. Is that, Mr. Anderson, is that something we can do? And is that clear to the committee? I'm sorry, that's what my amendment request is. Sorry, it's a little messy, but
So, Mr. Chairman, I think what we may need to do is throughout this, I think we might, instead of referring to a primary residence, we might just change that to residential real property. And then we might require the person to be a resident and then provide that definition. Instead of primary residence, we'd say a resident means a person who resided in Wyoming for not less than 8 months. So I think if we restructure the exemption a little bit to remove the references to primary residence and instead add residential real property and/or resident, I think that may accomplish what you're trying to do, Mr. Chairman.
that's what I'm attempting to do with the amendment.
That's what we thought you were trying to do.
Any questions?
Sorry,
Representative Riggins.
Can,
Mr. Chairman, Co-Chairman, if your intent is to allow them to qualify whether they're living in an owner-owned residence or any residence, that's where the difference falls. I think the language you were just referring to and what maybe Josh was talking to, you're talking about whether they just live in the state for 8 months, whether or not they owned or paid taxes. That was the description, that was the issue that we had in our conversation. So as long as you put, as long as they reside in an owner-occupied home, then I think that your goal is met. I think you're still trying to tie it to a home that they owned and occupied, but it could be multiple homes. I think that's what you're trying to get to. But I think it should be tied to the owner-occupied if that's what you're still trying to get to.
Mr. Chairman.
Follow up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Assessor Huxtable. That is exactly accurate with what we're trying to do. And Mr. Anderson, does that make sense?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, and so you'll see the first change there, we do require it to be an owner of residential real property, so I think we'll just need to clarify that throughout that, they have to.
Yeah, as long as,
Mr. Chairman.
And
Follow up.
Ms. Huxtable, does that make sense? Okay, thank you.
Representative Lean.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just ask if that's even necessary, because this is in the long-term homeowners bill. And so they would have had to have paid property taxes for 25 years total already to be able to qualify for this exemption.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Lean, the reason we were talking about this, because you do have people that have lived here for a long period of time but don't own the home anymore, and they wanted the exemption on a house that they didn't own. So they qualified because they had lived here and paid for a long time, but now they've moved into another home that maybe they don't own. And so just clarifying, do you want them to have an exemption on that home that's not theirs? And I think I agree, I mean, I understand what Josh is saying, as long as it states in here that it's owner, that the owner has to do it, I think you're probably covered.
Follow up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ms. Huxtable. So is there currently people receiving the exemption that are renting and receiving the long-term homeowners application?
Mr. Chairman and Representative, no, currently they are not because of how the language of the law is. It has to be owner. But if you were to change this, that they could qualify whether they were owning the property or just living in the state of Wyoming, I think that would open up some can of worms, was what our concern was.
Representative Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Huxtable, the title of the bill is long-term home owner. So having to, again, say that they actually own a home, I think that's repetitive.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Brown, that's certainly your policy. I'm just trying to make sure that we don't have language in there that we are required to give something that you didn't intend for us to do.
Mr. Co-Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So let me fix this real quick. I'm going to withdraw that amendment. And I'd like to withdraw that amendment and modify the amendment.
Sounds good.
Okay, so let me modify the amendment, and let's not make this change. Let's just change the date to March 1st. There's my amendment. Thank you.
Second.
Amendment number 2 has been moved and seconded. Any comments? Representative Lean.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I might advocate for May to remain in effect because tax bills go out on the fourth Monday in April, and those individuals that may not realize the time frame and the deadline, that they then will have the opportunity to apply for that. And so, and furthermore, there's other bills that I anticipate to draw for the same May deadline.
Comments? Representative Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to ask Assessor Huxtable to come back in opine on this.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Campbell, Representative Lean, we had asked for the March 1st to give us some additional time. Our abstract deadline, which is the deadline that we have to certify values, which this affects that value without any kind of a backfill, is June 1st. So the time between the fourth Monday in May and June 1st is pretty narrow for us to get these all processed accurately and to get the value in. We'd asked for it to be backed up to March 1st, which is already a deadline in the state, in the statutes regarding personal property. That's not a new deadline for people, March 1st is. If it's your pleasure to change them to the fourth Monday in May and leave it there, or change some other bill to that date, we'll do our best to administer whatever you put out there. It was just to be, make sure we had enough time to get them all processed timely and accurately.
Thank you, Mrs. Huxtable. Representative Riggins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would keep the date as amended, as originally, as you intended. You have a responsibility. You want to save some money, pay attention to what you're doing. Pay attention to those deadlines. So, no, I'm not sympathetic towards that because we're giving you enough time. Get to work. It's worth paying attention to the calendar for.
Okay, so
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
voting on the amendment for March 1st.
That's the only change.
All right, let's vote on the March 1st amendment date. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed?
No.
That amendment passes. Moving back to the bill. Any further comments? Representative Lean.
Mr. Chairman, a conceptual amendment for our great team on LSO. I would just like to offer the language that comes from the veterans exemption that once they've qualified, if there's no changes, that they can make a phone call to receive this from the assessor.
I'll second that one.
Any comments?
Excellent idea.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Did you get that, Josh? Okay. Any further comments? Moving to the bill.
Question.
Question's been called. Let's stick a fork in it.
So roll call vote for 26 LSO 0099, long-term homeowner tax exemption revisions as amended. Senator Case?
No.
Senator Dockstader?
Excused.
Senator Ide?
Aye.
Senator Pappas is excused. Representative Brown?
Aye.
Representative Campbell? Aye. Representative Lean?
Aye.
Representative Lucas?
Aye.
Representative Riggins?
Aye.
Representative Storer is excused. Representative Stivar?
Aye.
Representative War?
Excuse.
Excused.
Excused. Co-Chairman Locke?
See if you-
Aye.
Chairman McEwen.
Aye.
That is 11 aye, 1 no, and 4 excused.
Are we close to 100, Josh?
I sent out some language to your emails if you want to take a look, Mr. Chairman.
It's pretty good language.
Mr. Chairman, I misspoke. It is 9 aye, 1 no, 4 excused. I accidentally inflated the numbers.
We all voted for Senator Dockstetter. I better not say that, huh? Yeah. I actually like it.
When he says excise tax, in that first one, why does he use excise tax? Does it? Yeah, okay. I like it too. Yeah, but what happens if we don't get full reduction? You know what I mean? Because it says to replace the reduction.
Yes. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor or discussion?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, sorry, his microphone wasn't on, so I don't think we heard that, Mr. Chairman.
I apologize. I would like to make motion to move the amendments made by Mr. Anderson as is.
Second.
Discussion. Representative Lean.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd just like to ask our good LSO staff if this is essentially a backfill that would replace all property tax reductions, or if it would just take care of from the 25%, the 75% that's still currently floating out there.
So, Mr. Chairman, I think, so this amendment would take all residential real property to zero. And so I think this would be tied specifically to reimburse for residential real property reductions. It certainly clarify in any way, like I said, that was kind of quick language that we can certainly refine, Mr. Chairman.
I think he defines it as residential real property assessments, as I read it. Senator Ide.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've got some of the same concerns or questions of Representative Lean. The language that says local governments for property tax revenue reductions due to the reduction in residential property assessments. And to me, that's sort of vague too, on whether that's on the last, does that from the 25% on down effectively, or where from there? Thank you.
Good questions, Mr. Chairman, and like I said, I think we could potentially refine this. And yeah, like I said, I'll have to do a little more thinking about that, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Stivar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The question I've got, is the assessor still going to go out and assess the properties? To figure out what they're assessing? Or what the property tax should be, I guess is what I'm saying. I'm just wondering that.
Representative Campbell.
Mr. Chairman, we have some experts that we can utilize for this, and I suggest we do. I'd like to ask Assessor Huxtable to come back up and look at this and see if she's in agreement with this.
And Mr. Chairman, and as we pass that other bill that would provide for reimbursement based on the amount that is lost, I think we would need to structure that somehow to make those assessments and determine what that reduction is. So I think there likely would need to continue to be assessments on this property, even though it would be taxed at zero. But I'd defer to Assessor Huxtable.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Stivar, we are interpreting this just as LSO Josh Anderson stated. We would still be valuing and assessing these properties. They're just going to be brought to zero for tax purposes. But for the reimbursement, as that previous bill that you passed states, it's supposed to be reimbursed by the treasurer in the way as if the taxes had been collected. There's no way for us to do that without having a value. So we're going to have to value those properties, come up with a certified value for the treasurer to submit, as the bill is written, treasurer to submit to the DOR, so the DOR can reimburse, and then the treasurer would distribute based on as if it had been property taxes all along. So I don't see any way that we would not be valuing.
Go ahead, Co-Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and let me make sure I understand. So I'm going to say that I'm going to use a couple of numbers here that just help us with this. So, for example, with the exemptions that were in place, it went from one number to a lower number. But what I think this does is this locks us into the fact that we're going to go against this. We will reimburse the full assessed value. I believe that's what this locks us into. And I don't really necessarily believe that was the intent, so I can tell you that I'm against the amendment, if that's what it does.
Senator Case.
It might be helpful to think about this situation too, because as we have an adversarial system now where the taxpayer can come in and challenge the tax assessment, if we move to a system where the assessors now are just kind of verifying a value for third-party people, I mean, the homeowner doesn't care what their house comes in at, right? They could care less. So they're not going to contest anything. Think of the mission creep that could happen over a lot of years with a distorted tax system that's not adversarial, where the assessors are just collecting the information and reporting it, and then we put more money into the deal. I'd think about this a little bit. I mean, you've got to figure out how much money to reimburse them, and that's going to take the assessment. But think about the bill in general over time, what this would lead to.
Okay. Representative Riggins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It also references, it basically says make whole, replace all the taxes that they could lose, right? Off and on, there had been discussions of, and that was probably during the relief portion of it. We didn't make whole, we had to backfill, so it wasn't 100%. So that requires other taxes at 100% backfill, correct?
Any other comments? Representative Brown.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I'm wondering what we would do is, or what we'd be looking at if we were to assess them on the acquisition value. So that way, if they sold their home, of course, that value would go up. In the meantime, the counties would be looking at it as an acquisition value.
Go ahead, Co-Chairman Locke.
I'm going to reiterate, I'm against the amendment. I believe it locks us into something that we might darn well regret. So I'm going to be clear on that.
I think what I've heard too is what we've done so far with the trigger bill and what's in this, or I hate to use an Army term, but trying to get this perfect, we're almost pole vaulting mouse turds. I think we have it covered without the amendment.
This time, I'd like to withdraw my support for this amendment. I'd withdraw this amendment if my second agrees.
Okay,
Well, Mr. Chairman, we do have a conflict, because without the amendment, in essence, the people are going to vote on something that they don't know what it means, because it's not clear. So there has to be a backstory to tell them what the implications are. And they sort of have to trust us, or trust that the courts don't throw out the law that we're trying to hinge to it. So with the amendment, it makes it consistent. It's just that I was trying to point out a drawback of having this system over the long term. So I'm really speaking more against the bill.
well, on that note, we'll vote on the amendment. Representative Lean.
The amendment's been withdrawn.
I just have a commentary on the bill.
Okay, we'll move back to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to say that while I understand that there's some additional language to come, I would encourage our LSO team to continue to work on that, as I have an interest in it, that I'm willing to move this ahead just to see what kind of language we can come up with and further a conversation. But I want to make sure that this gets in, because I want the voters to really understand what it means to trade one for the other.
That's where I was trying to go 10 minutes ago. Okay. So, any other comments? Let's vote.
This roll call vote on 26 LSO 0100 residential property tax constitutional amendment. Senator Case. Senator Dockstader is excused.
Excuse.
Senator Ide.
Aye.
Senator Pappas is excused. Representative Brown.
Aye.
Representative Campbell. Representative Lean.
Aye.
Representative Lucas.
Aye.
Representative Riggins. Representative Storer is excused. Representative Stivar.
Aye.
Representative Wharf is excused. Co-Chairman Locke.
Aye.
Chairman McEwen.
Aye.
That is 9 aye, 1 no, and 4 excused, Mr. Chairman.
He was a well-decorated war hero. We're going to take about 10 minutes, and then we'll move into the next two bills. we're gonna start with, 26 LSO 102.
So, Mr. Chairman, we have 101 and 102 that go together. I didn't know. Do you want me to go to 102 first? Is that?
I think so, yeah.
Okay. So, Mr. Chairman, 26 LSO 102, Working Draft 0.5. This is a joint resolution to amend the Constitution to authorize the legislature to provide for the valuation of residential property for purposes of taxation. This is essentially, the idea of this was to make any constitutional amendments that may be necessary to do acquisition value, but it wouldn't lock the legislature into a acquisition value. It could do other valuation methods. So, Mr. Chairman, on page 2, Article 15, Section 1, adding, this is the requirement that all lands and improvements shall be listed for assessment, valued for taxation, and assessed separately. And this would add language, provided that residential real property that is valued using a valuation method determined by the legislature may not be required to be valued and assessed separately as determined by the legislature. Next, Mr. Chairman, Article 15, Section 10, the duties of the state board.
Hang on for a second. Go ahead.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman.
Co-Chair Locke.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, Mr. Anderson, if you don't mind, I might want to have you kind of explain these a little bit as we go, because I know that one, obviously, I've been over some of this ground with you, but maybe make clarification of why that is kind of necessary and make that clear, if you don't mind, sir.
Sure, Mr. Chairman, and that was just one of the issues that was identified with switching to acquisition value that might use a single value for the property. So you use your purchase price. That purchase price isn't split up between the land and the home. You're paying one price. So if we wanted to use that to value the property, that could go against this Article 15, Section 1 requirement to assess those separately, Mr. Chairman. So that's kind of why that change is there. Again, the change here, Article 15, Section 10, the State Board of Equalization shall be to equalize the valuation of all property in the several counties. And then this would add, except for residential real property that is valued using a valuation method determined by the legislature as prescribed by law. And again, similarly, if we were to go to something like acquisition value, then the state board wouldn't be equalizing those values. We would be using that value as determined by the legislature. So that's why that change is in there, Mr. Chairman. On to page 3, shall be uniformly valued at its full value as defined by the legislature and as provided in subsections B and E of this section. And then adding language to subsection B, all taxable property shall be valued at its full value as defined by the legislature except residential real property as provided in subsection E and agriculture and grazing lands. And then you see that existing language. And then that's just essentially to point to this new subsection E, specifying notwithstanding any other provision of the article, residential real property may be valued for purposes of taxation using a valuation method determined by the legislature as prescribed by law. And then the ballot statement, currently residential real property is valued for purposes of taxation by determining fair market value. This constitutional amendment would authorize the legislature to provide by law for valuation of residential real property using a valuation method determined by the legislature. So that's the bill, Mr. Chairman. I'd take any questions.
Yeah, Josh, I just want to make sure I got my mind wrapped around this one. This basically allows the legislature, for lack of a better term, to define fair market value versus full market value.
Yeah, so, Mr. Chairman, I think it would give the legislature flexibility to kind of determine any valuation scheme they would want for residential property without being limited by some of these other provisions that we've identified previously as maybe providing some limits on that.
So it kind of makes the Constitution more user-friendly in this area?
Mr. Chairman, I think, I think initially it was more specific to acquisition value, but as I said, it was kind of revised slightly to be more broad so that the legislature would not be locked into that as their only alternative method, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Okay, we'll open it up to comments.
You want to have them both together. That'd be better.
Yeah, let's let him talk and then we'll do that.
Good afternoon. My name is Ross Schriftman. I live in Casper, and I'm representing myself as a citizen and a homeowner. I am in favor of the bill. I'm going to talk about the bill in a minute. I just wanted to do a couple things first. My guiding principles of taxation, some facts related to my city in Casper, and then some comments on the bill. The ability for citizens to pay should be the foremost principle of taxation. Taxes should not be a burden, but a fair contribution to government by the citizens. Lower tax rates can result in increased revenue through economic growth, which was proven by the Kennedy, Clinton, Reagan, and Trump administrations. Limits should be placed on taxation of life's necessities, such as food, healthcare, clothing, and housing. Consideration of any tax should not be decided in isolation with the other taxes and fees citizens face at the federal, state, and local level. Tax policy should benefit the most citizens in a common sense approach and result in meeting only the basic needs for government services. Residential property taxes are the most unfair of all taxes. In most cases, owning a home produces no income. Instead, increasing values result in both increased taxes and increased expenses, including insurance, repairs, and utilities. The main cause of inflation is federal government spending. It is a hidden tax. Our federal government debt has now reached $38 trillion. This does not include the unfunded liability of $78 trillion over the next 75 years for Social Security and Medicare, as explained by the trustees of those two programs. The Nobel Prize-winning economist Milton Friedman once said, "Inflation is one form of taxation that can be imposed without legislation." This is affecting all of our government programs and our citizens. For example, my homeowner's insurance went up 62% last year. And it's not related to not having fire services. There's a fire station a mile from my house. It has to do with replacement costs. So the legislation this committee is considering is just one effort to address the overall increase burden facing Wyomingites. Residential property tax reform is a priority for the citizens of our state. When I was circulating the petition for the constitutional amendment to exempt 50% of residential values, I had more than 250 neighbors sign the petition, and only 5 did not sign. Government officials favor the concept of property taxes because it generates predictable revenue. Other forms of taxes, such as sales and income taxes, depend on economic stability and growth. Utilizing these types of taxation methods require politicians to be more concerned about how their spending and regulations can increase costs to individuals and businesses. They have to be more attuned and innovative to how their actions can affect their local economy than when they rely on property taxes. Now, some facts. Home values are increasing in Wyoming, making us the top growth state in the nation. Values increased nearly 5% in the last year alone. And in my written testimony that I've handed you, there's links to these statements. Therefore, it is likely that municipalities and counties will see additional revenue over time, despite the 25% residential property exemption. Personally, my property tax bill this year was still 30% higher than 4 years ago, as opposed to 70% higher before the bill was enacted last session. Although local politicians have claimed all kinds of service cuts to the passage of the 25% residential property tax legislation during the last session, the city of Casper projected revenue loss for this tax is only estimated to be between 1.5 and 1.8 million, which represents less than 1% of the city's overall annual revenue. Very few adjustments to services have taken place. In fact, the City Council has approved several highly expensive capital projects during this year, and many of them are for infrastructure, and which is a necessary service. The fact is the City of Casper's overall revenue has increased by 42% over the last 4 years, and spending has significantly increased as well, with new expensive capital projects being funded. So for instance, fiscal 22 was 128 million. This year it's 183 million. However, there was an amendment on October 7th, added $125 million in carryover from the prior year. So that's not new spending, but there's an additional $30 million in new spending for a total budget of $330 million. And again, that includes $125 million carryover. The city has unobligated reserves in 3 funds totaling more than $60 million, one of which is for government accounting requirements to pay upcoming general expenses. The city also received 54 federal grants in the last 2 years totaling $56 million, with 34 of those grants not requiring a local match. So our communities do get federal grants as well, which is, and I know this is a different subject, but the 10th Amendment of the United States Constitution limits the federal government to enumerated powers, and things like swimming pools, boat ramps, lighting, city planning, that's really a local and state issue. Okay, to the proposals. The constitutional property tax provisions you've just dealt with, there's some value to the acquisition value. First of all, pegging the property to what a buyer and a seller decide is a good way to go. And so I favor that. The other issue is because of the decisions you've made today, and that there's going to be 2 very different ballot initiatives in the fall of next year. Acquisition value, whether it's 101 or 102, well, 101 is a resolution, so it would be, I imagine, again, a ballot question. But 102 could be a stopgap in between now and when these ballot initiatives go to the voters. The voters will be deciding this at some point, at that point, and it won't be until 2027 that those bills are, or those amendments to the Constitution are enacted. So this could be a stopgap in the meantime. The other thing is, was just mentioned with the assessors, the value of still doing assessments, even if residential property is not taxed, is it'll give the legislature and the LSO and the Department of Revenue some idea of what the difference is between the sales tax being collected and what would have been collected under the residential tax going forward. So it'll give you more information at future sessions to figure out what's going on. The last thing I want to mention is, and it was mentioned this morning, City of Casper, the voters approved 4 special projects with an extra 1%, making our tax 6%. Revenue numbers are coming in quarterly, and it looks like we're doing pretty good as far as funding those 4 programs, those 4 projects that were approved. And it might be something to look at in the next couple months to see how they're doing and whether that tax has actually sent our residents to other communities around us like Mills and Evansville and Bar None to buy goods that are not exempt from the sales tax and see how much revenue has actually come in. They're projecting that it's going to be fully funded, those projects, about $18 million by about April of next year. So that might be some good information to see what's going on. And I'd be glad to take any questions.
Senator Ide.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being here, Mr. Schrickman. Good comments. I liked you highlighted the debt doom loop that we're faced with on a national level with 38 trillion in national debt and 70 to 100 trillion in unfunded liabilities. Those are good numbers for everybody to remember. And just to highlight some of your comments that, it's more of a fair tax to tax what you buy, not what you own or what you think you own, so you don't have to rent from the government. It boosts savings and encourages economic development. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
I think that's a good segue into 101. Then we'll take comments on 101 and 102 after we get through 101. Sorry about that.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Josh Anderson, LSO. This is 26 LSO 101, Working Draft 0.5, Property Tax Fair Market Value on Transfer. This is similar to the acquisition value bill that good co-chairman introduced during the last session, but was revised slightly to instead use fair market value on the year that the property is transferred or acquired. So getting into the bill, Mr. Chairman, on page 2, again, essentially just conforming change there to reference this new valuation procedure in 3913 103B 18. So on page 3, Mr. Chairman, again, the first couple changes there are those conforming changes, and then the new valuation procedure would start on the bottom of page 3. The following shall apply to the valuation of residential real property as subject to tax in this section. Beginning in January 1 of 2027, fair market value of residential real property shall be determined as follows. Subparagraph 1, for any residential real property that was last acquired on or before December 31st of 2019, the base year value shall be equal to the fair market value of the property on the January 1 of 2019. Subparagraph 2, for any residential real property that was last acquired on or after January 1 of 2020, the base year value for the property shall be equal to the fair market value of the property on January 1 of the year that the property was last acquired. Subparagraph B, the base year value determined under subparagraph A shall be adjusted as follows. And then subdivision 1, the base year shall be adjusted by an inflation factor that compounds annually, beginning in the first year after the base year value is determined. Under subparagraph A, that inflation factor shall be the lesser of 2% or the rate of the inflation in the consumer price index. Subdivision 2, the base year value shall be adjusted as necessary to account for increases in the value of residential real property caused by new construction or significant additions to the property. And that shall be added to the base year value of that property. The value shall be determined by the construction costs. Actual costs may be submitted to determine construction costs. If those are not submitted, or if those costs are not arm's length, then the construction cost shall be determined based on average construction costs in the state for the applicable tax year for a comparable construction or addition. Subparagraph C, the amount determined pursuant to subparagraphs A and B of this paragraph shall be the, and here I said taxable value, I think that should actually be the fair market value of the residential real property until ownership of the property is transferred to a new person. Each time residential real property is transferred to a new person, the property shall be valued as provided in subparagraph A to determine a new base year value, which then is subject to adjustment as in subparagraph B. In subparagraph D, the department's required to adopt rules necessary to implement this paragraph, including rules specifying how additions and costs are determined and reported. Subparagraph E, definitions, residential real property there. And I think I discussed with Co-Chairman Locke, may want to make this definition consistent with some of the definitions in the other bills, but right now it's not more than 4 families and associated land up to 35 acres. And then subdivision 2, definition of significant addition means construction that adds habitable square feet and includes where all or a portion of the dwelling is demolished and reconstructed, but significant addition shall not include finishing an unfinished portion of an existing dwelling. And then subdivision 3, transfer or acquisition. There's a list of transfers that are not considered transfers for purposes of determining a new value, including transfers between a spouse or between a parent and child, a transfer pursuant to a court order, including to effectuate a settlement agreement or in compliance with a decree of divorce, transfer of property to a trust established for the benefit of the immediately preceding owner, transfer of property to a corporation, partnership, or limited liability company if the immediately preceding owner is a shareholder, or a donation of residential property to a religious or charitable organization, including a nonprofit, or 6, any other transfer determined by the department by rule due to the relationship of the parties. Requires rulemaking in section 2. Section 3 specifies that it would not be effective or shall only be effective after certification by the Secretary of State that the constitutional amendment that we just discussed was adopted by the electors. And then effective date in January 1 of 27 if that constitutional amendment were to pass. So that's the bill, Mr. Chairman. I take any questions.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Open the floor up to testimony.
Can you hear me? I guess you can. Good afternoon, members of the Revenue Committee, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chairman. My name is Marty Hartzog. I'm Vice Chairman of the Board of Equalization, been here for 10 years, almost 11, and working in state government with the Attorney General's office before for about 27 years. I'm only here really to speak, make a few observations about 102. 101 really was something that we saw last year, and I won't speak to that one. Just to give you a little feel for where I'm coming from, the last constitutional change that was done, a lot of my friends came up to me and said, Marty, Is it a good idea or is it a bad idea? This is the one that created the separate classification for residential property. And I said, it's a good idea. It gives the legislature a little more flexibility, but I was able to clearly determine that from the language. And also having some understanding of how the property tax provisions in the Constitution work, that helped too. This one is a little troublesome, only because it seems like the language that you're changing in the Constitution is trying not to specifically say what you're trying to do. When you look at the change made to Article 15, Section 11A, the language that was already there said that the valuation is to be determined by the legislature. So that language is already there. You already had that language right there. It's been there for a long, long time. Then you added this little phrase, and as provided in sections B and E. Okay, so there's a redundancy because when we go down to E now, it basically says the same thing. When we go to E, it says, notwithstanding any other provisions of this article, residential real property may be valued for purposes of taxation using a valuation method determined by the legislature as prescribed by law. Now, that language already exists in A. You've said it again, and I guess the implication is now you can do something different that somehow is a carve out of the rest of the section. I think that's what you're trying to do. It would be much cleaner, one, if you actually said, we're trying to do an acquisition cost or acquisition method to value. That would clue the public into why you're doing this. I listened to the comments from Mr. Anderson, and I guess I'm a little queasy about the idea of just kind of throwing out there this broad authority to come up with a valuation method different than your authority already exists. I mean, that's the implication. Somehow this one's a little different. You don't have to comply with uniformity or full value. I think that's kind of what you're trying to get to. And I can tell you right now that uniformity and full value are such stalwart fundamental concepts within the Constitution. If you're going to imply an ability to kind of not follow those, you're running a risk if you don't say it. And because I can easily argue in court, I mean, just play this out, I can say, members of the court, the language that they added in this change already existed. The implication from the state perspective is that it did something different. They have some different authority to create a valuation methodology, and it somehow is different than the one they already had in A. Now, I can tell you the public is going to be confused, and when people come to me and say, is this a good idea or bad? I'm going to be like, it's really not, no offense, but it's trying to kind of, it's kind of oblique. It's not directly stating what you want to do, which is create a valuation method that doesn't strictly follow uniformity and full value guidelines, which is, this is something, I applaud that you're trying to do it in the Constitution, but I think just to ensure that you aren't subjected or vulnerable to a challenge, that you want to be pretty clear, because the court's going to have a hard time saying, yeah, on this evaluation methodology that the legislature gave itself authority to create through the vote of the people, it can now basically disregard the rest of the provision. And we're inferring that now. We're required to infer that because it doesn't say that really clearly in this language. We're inferring that from the language. So that's what I would say. Just be careful if you're going to get, I don't want to say cute, but just not be real candid with what you're trying to accomplish here. Going back to the language on Article 15, Section 1, it is extremely confusing because you say all lands and improvements thereon shall be listed, which is already there. All lands and improvements thereon shall be listed for assessment, valued and taxed and assessed separately, comma, provided that residential real property that is valued using a valuation method determined by the legislature may not be required to be valued and assessed separately as determined by the legislature. So within the same provision, it sets up kind of a juxtaposition between types of property. I understand what you're getting at. The problem with an acquisition cost is you're often only looking at one transaction, and that's your value, and you don't have the ability to break it out under that methodology. But this one is gonna stump people. I can't say that I'll be able to tell people that it makes a lot of sense. And then, like I said, the rest of it, you're kind of creating a repetition with your ability to create valuation methods or to determine how to value, and it already exists. So the implication that this is a different kind of power, you have to read through I guess you would have to read all of this testimony in this hearing to kind of back into that. You can't really get that from the language itself, just my opinion. And so with that, I will happily answer your questions or give you my thoughts.
Co-Chairman Locke.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Hartzog, for going through this, because I know we've been over this ground and I've been educated many times on how to do this. And this was a kind of an attempt to, or not an attempt, but one of the arguments has been the unconstitutional nature. So we tried to identify, we left it a little bit, in my mind, it being a little vague. I'm not trying to be vague, so that's maybe the wrong word, but I'm not trying to make this specific. I'm trying to leave options for the legislature. Let me put it that way, rather than say vague. It wasn't an attempt to be vague, it was an attempt to leave options. And where we found issues that we were trying to address, to give us options, was this valued separately was one example, where we, with different options, we run into, that's obviously a potential area of conversation. So that was one. And that's why I ask, I guess, do you have different wording you would propose? Because in many cases, I would agree with you, some of this would appear to be redundant based on the conversation. We're not trying to make it redundant. There are certain areas where, for example, I might argue that fair market value at your time of purchase is that's going to be fair market value or full value, depending on how you do that. So we were just trying to make sure that that flexibility was there for the legislator to make some decisions to say, hey, you don't have to reassess everybody's property every year and charge them based on, charge them taxes on unearned capital gains. We're trying to give options along those lines. Do you have a recommendation of verbiage in any of these areas that you would propose?
Co-Chairman Locke, Chairman McCune, I think going back to kind of what you were thinking last year, and that's being specific, I realize you're trying to create kind of a framework where you can do things a little different without pinning yourself down. But when you put the acquisition cost in the Constitution, that covers it, because that cost includes all of these things. You can't separate out the properties. And so what you would say is just directly state it with this valuation authority. The legislature does, that need not comply with the balance of Article 15, Section 11. And that's kind of what you've tried to do, but I would just be a little more forthright in how you say that, and just tell them, put it out there so that's where you're trying to end up. And otherwise, like I said, it's just critical that you don't allow this confusion where the core tenets, the components of property tax are two and full value. Those two, from the beginning of time, the beginning of territoriality, all of those two were critical. And so anything you can do to assure that the intent was to kind of remove residential properties from those constraints is critical. It really is. I would just be more forthright and do it without kind of trying to be less than clear.
Representative Lean.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for joining us today, Mr. Hartzog. So I know that you've testified in front of our committee many times. And so this last spring, I believe that I heard you say The Constitution as it is now does not offer us the authorization to be able to input acquisition value as prescribed by law by the legislature. So then I ask you, in Article 15, Section 11, Section D that you referenced today, how do we change that to implement acquisition value in your opinion?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chairman, Representative Lean, I think, again, what you need to do is carve out what you're trying to do and say they're simply not subject to those provisions in the Constitution. Acquisition cost is permitted. This is basically what California did. Acquisition cost is permitted and is not subject to the other limitations applied in Section 15, Section 11. That's how you do it, because uniformity and full value don't allow you to use acquisition costs right now. That was the problem. And so you really have to create an exception in the Constitution for this narrow area of residential property and the acquisition cost. And that's the most understandable way, and it's also the cleanest way to do that. Otherwise, you're going to immediately run into Article 15, Section 11, both A and D, as well as C, because you create a lot of different classes right out of the gate. You know, you're creating tons of classes, the way different property owners would be treated. That ugly word, you hate to hear it, de facto classes that are not actually lined out in the statute or in the guidelines, but arise by virtue of how you treat a party, de facto classes. So never a term you want to hear in constitutional law, because it means you've stepped beyond the framework of what you're trying to do.
Senator Dox, wait, Representative Worf, then Senator Doxter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess the question that I have and the problem that I have is we talk about the constitutionality of uniformity. And I think, you know, when I'm just going to use my subdivision, I'm sure everybody can reflect on their subdivision where they live, but all the homes in my subdivision all started out on the same floor plan. The houses are pretty. I mean, you had like 3 or 4 different options. And at the time, there was probably uniformity in the value of all those houses. You know, some of them might have had a little bit bigger lot than others, but I have a problem saying that in order to stay within the Constitution and maintain the uniformity, we got to treat all those houses in that subdivision the same, because we've all seen the difference between individuals that have maybe taken better care of their lodgings versus those that, you know, they start collecting things. You got junk cars, junk trailers, you got all kinds of things sitting around. To me, what I kind of take umbrage to what you said about it's being coy. I think we're being very clear in how we're writing this. We're basically stating that it's going to be based on the value of the house, and that is also going to depend on the property. If I've got a 40-acre lot, maybe I'm breaking it up now. Maybe I now have the ability to pull off part of that and sell part of that, put another house on it. All of those things should give us the ability to assess the difference between my house and my neighbor's house. And it feels like to me, we're stuck in this condition right now where we're trying to protect uniformity, but uniformity doesn't exist. You can go through my neighborhood, and like I said, all those houses started out the same. None of those houses are the same today. And so I guess that's the question I have is, if we wanted to be able to give our assessors the latitude to actually look at it, how else would you recommend that we write that law than to write it the way it is? Because the way I see it is, it's saying first you start with the value. Next, you look at anything else. If I put additions onto my home, or if like I'm going to subdivide and I'm going to pull off some of my land and put another house on it, all of those things change that factor. And to me, that's what I think's being lost in this obligation to protect this uniformity that doesn't exist. So what would be your recommendations? I mean, you said we're kind of being coy with this. How do we make it more clear? That's what we're trying to do, is set it up to where you start off with the value of the house. If there's been any changes, significant changes to your property, then those changes should be on there. If I bought my house for $150,000 and then I added another $50,000 addition to my house, I think that my assessor could make the argument that my house is no longer valued at the 150 because I put an addition on there that I can show was $50,000. And so therefore it should be now assessed at a $200,000. And to me, that's what we're trying to do. And I guess if you can say it better than we've got it now, that's what I'd like to hear from you, is how would you make that more clear if you think it's causing ambiguity or confusion with our people? Because nobody on this committee wants to confuse our constituents.
Mr. Co-Chairman, Mr. Chairman.
Please.
Representative Worf, I'm only speaking to 102, which is the constitutional change that's being contemplated. And as I've explained, the language that you would have the public vote on to change Article 15, Section 11, some of the others, but mainly 11, is just somewhat unclear because it doesn't specify how you are going to have the authority to create a methodology that is not subject to the other provisions. So all I'm saying there is I would simply spell out very directly the Wyoming Legislature may enact an acquisition cost and the value methodology, and those valuations, that methodology shall not be subject or constrained by the rest of Article 15, Section 11. That would be the cleanest way to do it. On the other, and I can actually teach a doctoral program on uniformity and equal taxation under Wyoming law. I've been going through it with a fine-tooth comb. Basically, the system we have is uniform and equal because the methodology, mass appraisal, takes all of the properties, appraises them, adjusts for any kind of change of value brought on by obsolescence and depreciation, and then that valuation is arrived at. What happens when you have a non-uniform or an unequal valuation is that the methodology itself, and this comes right out of the court's cases, the methodology or the governmental action itself intends and by design creates a discriminatory system. It treats different parties or the same parties or identical parties differently on purpose. That's where the court has said that you are going to have an action for a constitutional violation. Other one-offs and where an assessor makes a mistake or there's a problem with how the assessor is working, that's not actionable under the Constitution according to Wyoming case law. So I'm sorry, I'd probably require me another hour to answer all of your questions, but that's what I'm trying to point out, is simply that the change to the Constitution that's contemplated leaves the legislature somewhat vulnerable to the argument that you really haven't removed the residential valuation from the constraints and the limitations and requirements of the Constitution. It doesn't do so clearly enough. And a court could easily say, well, the language here on its face doesn't do it. Now, if you want the court to read between the lines and dig into the legislative history, they may do that, but they're not inclined to do that. They will always start with the language, and if the language is on its face applicable, they won't go further and try to untangle and kind of recreate how you got to your decision. So that's basic constitutional interpretation law, and I hope I did okay in answering your questions.
You did. If I can ask a follow-up, because this is a situation that I am aware of that occurred in the county where the capital is. And an individual went in and was looking at it. He saw how much his neighbor had paid on his taxes, and he went in and asked how come the lots are the same. Just like I said, everything's the same, but his neighbor's paying significantly less. And when he brought that up, the assessor said, well, you got to come in and challenge it. If you don't challenge it, we can't lower it. Now, to me, that's not uniformity. This whole idea, I feel like we're being told we got to focus on uniformity, and we don't focus on uniformity because there is no uniformity. They're all unique. So I guess that's the question I have is how do you get at the fact that the Constitution says we have to use uniformity when uniformity doesn't exist?
Mr. Chairman, I think that what you're pointing out is a problem, and without all of the information necessary to really evaluate what properties you're talking about and the results. But in any system, you may have discrepancies or problems on a case-by-case basis, and that is not the point of the uniform and equal taxation mandate. The law recognizes that it's not perfect. What it says is you cannot intentionally, by systematic design, try to discriminate. And so when that happens, you've now run afoul of the Constitution. So what you're describing, just assuming what you are saying is true, and the values weren't correct, it doesn't mean that the system wasn't designed to be uniform and operate in an even and fair way. It is. But you can have that, that one-off or that instance where the valuations don't make sense. That does happen. And we hear those appeals all the time.
Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Ken Gill, Department of Revenue, Property Tax Division. Not going to speak to the constitutional amendment piece. I don't know enough about that part, so I'm gonna stay out of that and just concentrate on the working draft 101. The first thing I would bring up, it would be the changing of the definition of the residential real property from 4 to 3. That's our current law right now. Anything over 3 is considered commercial property. So that's on page 7, line number 3. This proposal leaves a lot open to interpretation by the Department of Revenue. We're to promulgate rules on this. And if I look at California's laws, they added 179 pages to their rules just to cover acquisition value in that state. They basically covered every scenario you could think of, and I'm sure that document's grown over time as new situations arose to implement this. So it will add quite a bit to our rules for sure. The other thing I had, and the last thing I have, Mr. Chairman, I would ask for the committee to consider changing the effective date on page 10 from January 1, 2027 to January 1, 2028. And the reason I ask that is if this should pass, if the constitutional amendment should pass the voters in November of 2026, we're not going to have a lot of time. And we're going to need to do some extensive programming. First of all, the programming for the, I guess I'll call it the rollback piece, where we go back to January 1 of 2019, and we also go back to January 1 of 2020. That's going to take a lot of programming, and obviously not all programming is going to take care of that. We're going to have to do, there's going to be a lot of manual input of the properties that have sold or changed or were constructed from that 2019 to 2027. So I would just respectfully ask you to consider maybe changing that to 2028. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I would stand for any questions.
Committee questions? Well, thank you, Mr. Gill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Good afternoon.
Welcome back.
Welcome back. Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Dixie Huxtable. I'm the Converse County Assessor, and I have with me my colleague from the County of Fremont, and she's here to back me up and make sure that I don't miss something or we don't miss something together. First of all, I'm going to start with 101. As Director Gill said, we're not lawyers, so we're going to defer a little bit of that constitutional amendment to the legal eagles in the area. So we're going to start with 101, and to be frankly honest, a week ago, my comments were completely different than they're going to be today, because this bill changed. So the comments to version 0.4 were totally different than the comments to 0.5. This is not, as it's written in my opinion and our opinion as assessors, acquisition. This bill never takes the property to acquisition. This property starts with a value this bill takes the property and starts with a value in 2019 and adds an arbitrary percent, 2%, that was chose by the drafters of the bill, to this property every year. And it never does go to the acquisition value of the property, which is a big difference from the version 4 that we were looking at last week. So on page 3, we're talking about it's shall be determined by this paragraph, and it goes on further on to 4 and starts with tax year 2027. And I heard Director Gill just ask that this be changed to 2028, and we would support that because there's going to be some significant changes. But what it's doing, it's going back to a base value, going back to that clawback, whatever version you want, whatever you want to call it. It's going back to January 1st of 2019 on all the property that existed, at least in 2019. And we're going to start with that base value. And then we're going to add 2% or the rate of the consumer price index for every year after that. And then it goes on to talk about for properties that sold after January 1st of 2020, it starts with the base value of January 1st of the year of the sale. I'd like to explain a little bit how we get our values on January 1st of each year. We use the sales from the preceding year in our analysis to determine what that value is going to be for the next year. So for 2026, or for 2026, just getting ready to set those values as of January 1st of 2026, we are looking at the sales that occurred in 2025. And those sales will affect potentially the values that get set for January 1st of 2026. So in this bill, if that's your intent that the acquisition or the sales price play a part in the base value for that property, then we need to be using January 1st of the year immediately following the year of sale. Otherwise, that sale has no implication. We're going back to a base value before it ever sold. So that's the first thing that we would ask that, and I believe that would be on page 4, like line 16, 15 and 16, value of the property on January 1st of the year of the property was last acquired. We would say following year, okay, January 1st of the following year, because then you will have gotten a value that has that sale embedded into it. The other thing that moving forward, it talks about the increase in value, the inflation factor, the 2% or rate of consumer price index. Nowhere do I see in here where if the properties were going down. There are some counties, there are some locations where they weren't going up 2%. I don't see in this bill where you have the opportunity to not apply that 2%. So I would just ask you to consider that. There was going to be some areas, and I think the department has some of the statistics on that, where if this was applied in some counties, the property values are actually going to go up. They're not going to go down, they're going to go up because they were not going up 2% per year cumulative. Moving on page 5, where it's talking about adjusted as necessary to account for increases in the value. And it talks on line 17 about actual costs may be submitted. We would ask that you actually strike the language from line 17 where it says actual costs all the way through down to 23 through construction costs. we want you to let the department set that. Let the department set the construction costs that shall be determined based on average construction costs in the state, and let the department do that through their rules. The reason being, the way this language is written, it allows a taxpayer to bring us their bills, walk in with their receipts for their additions. I have no way of verifying that those receipts are accurate or even appropriate for that property. I have probably many taxpayers that don't have those receipts. They're going to get, that addition's going to get costed based on the Department of Revenue's costing averages. I want to keep this fair and consistent. So if they're going to get it because they didn't think to keep their receipts or didn't know they needed to keep their receipts, I think it should be fair and uniform. Just any addition, any construction costs that we're going to adjust that base value with, let us use department promulgated rules to do that. And that way we're consistent and uniform across the state. Moving on page 7, I had highlighted as well the change from a 4-family property to a 3-family to stay consistent with, as Director Gill had talked about, that's consistent with the language throughout all the bills that we've been dealing with in the last few years. We have also added a question if you want to change on line 5 where it says associated residential land up to 35 acres. Maybe this would be the appropriate time to change that and just say associated land and take the up to 35 acres off. Trying to stay consistent with other language that we have in statutes. On page 7, line 12, where it talks about significant issue, we have a lot of questions about that, and I don't know that we want to get into that right now. I think department rules will be something that we would have to work with. It speaks to significant addition means any construction of residential real property that adds habitable space, habitable square feet to the residential real property. Our concerns about that one include, probably not limited to, a basement that's unfinished when it's built is not considered habitable in most cases by both realtors and by our office. So when they finish that, is that now habitable space? That's something that can be dealt with in rules, I'm confident, but I want you to be aware of it. Also, a house that's not completed originally on January 1st, maybe it's 50% completed, but it gets completed the next year, how we handle those. Again, it could be handled through rules, but I just want you to be aware that that's a question mark for us. Do you want me to go on through, or I can
Representative
take this
Stivar.
question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You brought habitable space up. So somebody puts a deck on. Is that habitable space? Can they sleep out there in January?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Stiver, I'm not going to address whether they can live in it. I'm going to state that would be something we're going to have to handle through rules. What is defined as habitable space? I truly don't have that answer. That's one of the reasons we're asking about this, to get the clarification so that the department, as they're working on the rules, know what the intent of this legislation really is. I hope that answered your question.
Representative Riggins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Ms. Huxtable. When you mention base value, when you look at you take out a previous year's notice, there's a little box in there that has a value. I don't know, I can't remember if it's just MV or FMV, and I don't know if it's consistent throughout by county. Would that be the base value from the previous year? Typically.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Riggins, as we understand it, yes, we would be looking into our system for the value that was established on January 1st of 2019 or the preceding year, however this language came out. That would be the fair market value that I think we're interpreting this is going to be. That's going to be the base value that we're going to start with for property that's acquired. A couple of other comments on this. So in my county, I have had my staff field check some of those property. By this time this goes into effect, my people will have been to that property twice since 2019. And all the changes since then are in the system. I don't believe without a significant amount of programming, there's going to be a way for me to go back and get how all those changes affected that value. I can get the value from 2019. That's not a problem. But all the changes that were made during those field checks are going to be extensive for us to identify, attribute which value goes to which piece of the property, and figure out how to add that to the base value. So it's some significant work on our part, which we're not afraid to do, but it's going to take some significant programming with our software designer to do that. Also, one other question or one other comment that we have or that we've talked about is appeals. What value on a given year is the taxpayer available to appeal? Because their value, according to this version of this bill, started in 2019 and added 2%. Assuming, in a property, presuming no changes or additions. So we get to 2028, do they have a right to appeal that value? What are they appealing? I would ask for some clarification on that.
Representative Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Huxtable, when you talk about the habitable space, I know during the last session we talked about this. And what I'm in favor of is if they don't change the footprint. So if they have an unfinished basement and they finish that basement, as far as I'm concerned, I'd like to see them stay where they're at with their property tax. And then when they sell the home, it would be acquisition value at that point. So that they can do things to their home to improve their home and yet not raise their property tax. So I wouldn't be in favor of doing it that way. Thank you.
If I could follow up with that, Mr. Chairman, Representative Brown, I absolutely understand that, respect that if that's the intention that you want. Remember, this is not acquisition. I'm not going to acquisition when they sell that property. I'm not starting with this bill, this version. I'm not picking up that new acquisition bill. I'm still using that old value with the 2% increase. So just make sure that we're all still on the same page. We're using that acquisition word a lot in the last couple of hours. This bill does not ever get us to acquisition as I think it's been talked about in the last couple of hours.
Representative Lane.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Ms. Huxtable. My question for you is, could you use your property tax profiles or your SOCs to be able to figure out where some of those changes have occurred in the previous statements as if you were going to go back to 2019?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, absolutely. We have really good notes in our system, so we know when and what was added, but it was added at a cost back then. And so my question is just figuring out the logistics of how I'm going to go pick up that they did the addition in 2022, or they finished a basement in 2023, knowing what part of the value is going to be contributed for those things that were added and how that fits this bill and how I get them into the system. It's going to be a challenge. Not undoable, I'm just saying it's going to be a challenge. You got to give us a little time to get the system to do that. And with that, if I have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. And I have my colleague here, Ms. Berg from Fremont County, if she has any comments.
I think you've covered it.
You didn't have your thing up.
Questions? Co-Chair Locke.
I'll make one comment. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Ms. Huxtable. And one of the things that I think as we went through a couple of revisions, I believe the goal, at least my goal, would be to amend in paragraphs Romanet 3 and 4, which basically takes us back to that acquisition value and I think we will probably support the recommendation. But it takes you through that process up to, in this case, I think we would take the department's recommendation and everyone's recommendation to move this to 2028. At least this is my opinion on this. But then that's when what I've been referring to as fair market value at time of transfer. That's where those paragraphs, I know those paragraphs in a couple of the versions got dropped, but my goal is to amend those back in to make sure that that's clear.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Locke, thank you so much for clarifying that, because that brings us to a couple of other questions. If that is in fact where you're going with this, ag land is a big issue. We don't know how you intend us to handle ag land. When a ranch sells with significant amount of land and a house, what are we supposed to do with that particular property? And we would need some significant guidance on how that's going to work. They do not break down the price typically of that sale of that ranch between the house and the land. And yet we are supposed to be at that acquisition value for the residential property, which is the house and associated land underneath that house. So that needs to have some serious thought on how you're going to handle agricultural properties specifically if you actually go to acquisition as defined as acquisition.
Senator Ide.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Huxtable, thanks for all of your commentary. It's good stuff. On the ranch land sale, hypothetically, the way you tax that right now, though, is the house and the associated land up to like 1 acre, if I'm not mistaken. And so that would essentially be already taken out, even though the property was sold at a whole, you're still taxing that 1 acre and that structure. And tell me where I'm wrong on that. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Senator, I know you're absolutely correct. We are valuing the residential house and the land underneath it separately. But as you know, ag is defined by the Constitution on how it's going to be valued. And it's valued differently, not at fair market value. It's at a production value. So when that sale came in for X amount of dollars, that was at fair market value. That was typically not a production value. It's fair market value, and it included the house and all the buildings. So what I'm asking is, what part of that acquisition price do I allocate to the house, or do I ignore it on residential property that are on agricultural property? How are we to handle that? And that's a big part of our question on how to handle it when you go to actual acquisition.
Representative Riggins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Huxtable, page 9, top of the page 1, where it talks about determining by rule should an acquisition of property due to the relationship of the parties or other factors or influence the sale. Basically, an invalid sale as described. Do you, and I don't think I see anything more beyond that about is the sale valid or not, unless it was in the earlier part of the program. Do you, I have ideas of what a definition should look like, and I would suppose you would too.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Riggins, absolutely when it comes to a valid sale. So I think this part of the bill is trying to define what is not included in a transfer, what is not considered a transfer that would trigger either the acquisition value or starting a new value. Certainly, I think that language was put in there to allow the department by rule to describe any other kind of transaction that may not be specifically defined in statutes. I can't think of one off the top of my head, but I'm sure they're there. I got several assessors in this room that could probably tell you 100 different versions of how property changes hands. And so there's probably one out there, but I don't know it off the top of my head.
Okay, well, thank you. Mr. Moline.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Brett Moline, Wyoming Farm Bureau Federation. And before I make any comments, I guess one question. See, like Co-Chairman Locke said that you might amend this to go to true acquisition value rather than the way the bill stands now. Is that a correct understanding?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And yes, Mr. Moline, that is my my goal. I think in the versions we had, we kind of missed a paragraph, and that's on me. And but yes, I'm going to offer that amendment up to the committee.
Okay, well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple of questions, and I've been known to see black helicopters, but what if I'm selling my house and I put a large value on the personal items, furniture, etc. And so then the property value would be substantially less. Not to say, I guess, for nefarious purposes, a way to lower that acquisition cost. The current system has protections against that because, we're supposed to be looking at common, similar sales. What safeguards are in there for this? And I do want to echo one last comment about, the way it looks right now is that this bill would not account for those years where price of housing indeed drops. It's not near as common as when prices appreciate, but we've still had inflation, low inflation, but the price of housing has dropped. The way I read this, that it would stay at what you paid for it, however you determine that value. Thanks for this opportunity. With that, I would take any questions the committee may have for me.
Representative Riggins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Because it's the insurance question I have, what happens to a property if it's received severe damage? Does it how's the assessment value work when that happens? If it takes half a year to replace, or is usually all repaired up and back to the original value that it was assessed previously that year?
Mr. Moline.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Riggins, I have no idea how to answer that. I am no way affiliated with the insurance industry. I work for the Federation, not the insurance company, so I cannot answer that question.
Other questions from Mr. Moline?
No, thanks.
All right, thank you, Mr. Moline, for your testimony. Other folks we have online to testify? Anyone else? Anyone else in the room to testify on these two bills? It looks like no, and nobody online, just making sure. Okay. All right, so I guess we'll close public comment, and we probably should start with these two bills separately, so let's do that. Let's start with the constitutional, this is 102. Committee, what's your pleasure? All right, the bill has been moved by Senator Ide and seconded by Representative Brown. All right. Comments on that bill amendments, we can walk through it. Let me get back to that just a moment. Get back to that version. All right, I'm on 102, so let's just go through them page by page if there's any amendments to the constitutional amendment. Page, let's see, is there any changes on page 1? Page 2 is the first changes there. Any discussion or amendments? Representative Stivo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Now, I know this is another constitutional amendment that's going on the ballot. Are we putting out too many? My question is, how many constitutional amendments are out there now? How many more are we going to put on? Are we going to be confusing the voters on which one to vote for, which one? If they all pass, that's what problem I'm seeing is these constitutional amendments. Right now, there's so many more out there.
Anyone else to answer that? I'm happy to give my 2 cents on this. At least in my opinion, and I'll leave it to that, but as the chair here, I just want to be careful about that. At least in my opinion, these are 2 different options moving forward, is how I view these. And so I'll leave it at that. I don't think that it would be the legislature's goal to push. I know we've talked about 2 of these in the House today, and similar to what we've done with bills in the past, I know there was concerns about this in the last legislative session. There was a bunch of property tax bills, and there were, and as you know, it's a hot topic from everybody's perspective. But the goal ultimately for the legislature was to find the one that the legislature and that the people could be the most comfortable with, and that made the most sense, and try to push an appropriate bill forward. So in my opinion, that's what we're doing in this case. Again, I will turn this back over to the chairman so he can comment if he would like, but that certainly is where I would like to go with this. I don't think, we're not going to be pushing 5 constitutional amendments across out there on this topic. I think the goal is to find the process and approach to, I would call it property tax reform that makes the most sense. And whether these do or these don't, that's still yet to be voted on. But it's not to shoot to the public 20 different options. That's not the goal.
Yes, Representative Riggins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this by itself, that would be the constitutional amendment that they would be voting on. Now, this is as basic as it can get. So after this, whatever is tied to it with all these other bills. So what if we don't get any of those bills through? What happens to this? Does this end up on the ballot by itself? Just wondering. And what form would that take? So, any help?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Representative Riggins, if I understand your question right, we're talking about the constitutional amendment.
Yeah, 100.
And in my opinion, if the legislature has decided that acquisition value is not the approach they want to take, then and this is my opinion, of course, then the answer is that 101 and 102 are voted together, for lack of a better term. Currently, the way wait a minute, I got them backwards. 101 is the actual bill. Sorry, I'll get it straight here in a minute. It is actually a trigger bill is the way it is currently set up. Because in the absence of the constitutional change, the belief is that it is unconstitutional. That's been the battle in the past. So basically, if that bill goes nowhere, if the constitutional change, and if you were to vote against the bill, you're voting against, really, we should be voting down the constitutional change, the legislature. So that's, if that makes sense. Did I make that clear, or did I muddy the water?
It's only,
I'd
excuse me.
like to add into that a little. It's, as we're trying to get through this, it's really an argument of putting the cart before the horse or the horse before the cart. Well, I would argue that if you just had a cart and not a horse, you don't have anything. And if you don't have a horse, or you have a horse and not a cart, I guess you could ride it and have fun, but I guess what I'm saying is they go hand in hand. And we're trying to make sure that we have 2 options going into the session. And we'll kind of see where everybody's leanings are. Does that help?
Mr. Chairman, So there's a possibility that there would be no ballot measure? Or am I mistaken? I mean, if we struggle to get these bigger bills through, well, there'd be nothing to vote on. And what would the passage of the previous election, how would the public respond to that, I guess? I'd like to ask Mr. Anderson to comment if you get my gist of this?
Mr. Chairman, I'm not 100% sure if I'm following, but so is the question that if this constitutional amendment were to be on the ballot, but the related bill would not, what would occur, or am I missing the question, Mr. Chairman?
Residential property tax constitutional amendment all by itself. Now, I could see if we had a bunch of language in here beyond just these two lines, give something, for example, what if I decided that, made a little minor changes to the language at the bottom of page 2 and put the percentage of value prescribed for residential real property shall not be more than 8.5%. Period. No property tax shall be assessed on residential property without legislative approval.
Well, we can, given Amendment A, we have the ability to drop it to 8.5% without a constitutional amendment. And even if this constitutional amendment went through without acquisition value, its goal is to loosen things up for the legislature for definition. So even without 101, it still could be a win.
Thank you.
Representative Lean.
Well, Mr. Chairman,
Senator Case.
we had quite a bit of discussion from Mr. Herzog about how he didn't think this was the greatest written piece of thing in the whole world. And it might be hard for a court to interpret it. And it basically just repeats what we already have.
Anybody else?
This is a roll call vote on 26 LSO 0102 residential property tax value constitutional amendment. Senator Case.
I'm trying to be consistent here, so I think I'll vote no.
Senator Dockstader.
Excused.
Senator Ide.
Aye.
Representative Brown.
Aye.
Representative Campbell. Representative Lean. Representative Lucas.
Aye.
Representative Riggins.
No.
Representative Storer is
green over here.
excused. Representative Stivar.
Aye.
Representative Worf.
Aye.
Co-Chairman Locke.
Aye.
Chairman McEwen.
Aye.
That is 9 aye, 2 no, 2 excused.
Okay, I think we'll work 101 next. What's your pleasure? Bill's been moved. Do I have a second? I have a second. Discussion. Page 1. Nothing to see here. Page 2. Page 3. Page 4. Representative Stivart.
Line 2 on page 4, where it says January 1st, 2027, should that be changed to 2028? Is that one of the changes that was recommended?
Yes.
I second that amendment.
Okay. And let me, amend, any place that says January 1st, 2027, throughout the whole bill needs to be changed to January 1st, 2028. That's my amendment.
I agree. Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Representative Lean.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe it would belong on this page, but I may need some help from LSO. I would just like to offer a conceptual amendment that says something to the effect of if the values have trended downward, that the assessors can give them the reduction in value.
Do we have a second for that?
Second.
Discussion.
Mr. Chairman, I think that would be very desirable because I've seen 2 times in Wyoming's history when there have been major devaluations in property. But I'm trying to see how that would work with the bill because you still have the escalating clause. And so how would you do that? You need a notwithstanding the market. If the market goes up by 2% or more, it's 2%, but if the market goes down, it's the down. It's kind of what you're saying. I wish they did that with gas prices. That'd be great. How would we do that?
I'd leave it amended.
Josh?
Can we change the language? I mean, I know we can change the language. That was a dumb question.
Long day.
It has. Co-Chairman Locke.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I actually am very much in favor of this amendment. I believe that that should be an escalation and de-escalation clause, depending on the direction that the actual real estate or, the market is going. But I'm guessing that what we would have to use for the de-escalation is something to the effect of, the inflation, the same index, I'm guessing, is what we would have to use. I don't know, I would have to defer to LSO on what's the best approach, but the objective, of course, is to use the de-escalation clause. The intent of that escalation clause was not unlike the 4% capping function. And so if we could add words that would allow that to go both directions, that was actually the intent. And I think even when we did the 4%, I don't know that we gave ourselves the de-escalation option, but that would certainly be my goal with this, or I would certainly agree with that concept that, because if you think about it, the 2% wasn't really intentionally designed as it's gonna magically go up 2%. The objective was based on property values, if you will. And do we need to support a different index? Do we need to support an index or whatever? But I would certainly support that amendment, and I think it's a good option. The objective with putting a cap on it, and the question, I guess, for this committee is, do we cap it both ways to try to create some predictability? So,
Mr. Chairman, I understand exactly what you're saying. It makes there's a lot of logic there. But if values for property have actually fallen, but you're a taxpayer and you're stuck with trying to get your value down, but you can't because I've seen them fall in Lander, they fell by half. Yeah, I mean, it was unbelievable. And you're stuck paying taxes from a value that was really years ago. That you're not gonna like that as a taxpayer.
Still going down.
I think maybe the language doesn't need to have a cap on the downward turn. I don't think we need for lack of a better term, a de-escalation clause, but a de-escalation percentage or amount.
It's kind of funny how we're trying to get away from market value, but we have we have the 2% that is, the idea was it doesn't go to market value, but a de-escalation is based on market value because it's, but we're trying to get rid of market value.
Mr. Chairman, just for clarity, I did ask for an amendment that was conceptual that LSO take to be able to put that in, incorporating all of these ideas.
Fantastic. Okay, are we ready to vote on the amendment? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All righty. Rolling right along. Rest of page 4. Excuse me, rest of page 4. Go ahead, Co-Chairman Law.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Right after Romanet paragraph, or not Romanet, but Roman numeral 2, paragraph on lines 17, I believe this is the right location where I would like to insert some language that in the process of amendment, I think we kind of accidentally, and that's on me. We would like to insert that change to where, and the paragraphs were actually in a previous version of the document where Romanet or Roman numeral 3 basically is this, let's see, I think this is the right place. Sorry, let me get adjusted here. Is that something you can maybe, well, let me not torture everybody too bad. I'll try to get to it. The Roman numeral, I had it, and Roman numeral. Okay, so Roman numeral 3, what it would read is, for any residential real property that is acquired on or after January 1st, 2028, there shall be a rebuttable presumption that acquisition value of the property is the fair market value of the property. The acquisition value shall be used as the base value for the property, except as provided in subdivision 4 of this subparagraph. And then paragraph, Roman numeral paragraph 4 says, notwithstanding subdivision 3 of the subparagraphs, for any residential real property that is acquired on or after January 1st, 2028, the fair market value of the property for January 1 of the year of the property was acquired shall be used as the base year value for the property if the presumption under the subdivision 3 of this paragraph, and this is subparagraph 1, the presumption under the subdivision 3 of the subparagraph is rebutted by a preponderance of evidence showing that the acquisition price paid to acquire the property was not a fair market value because the party of the transaction was acting under the undue influence of the terms of the transaction were not negotiated at arm's length between an informed buyer and seller. So in this case, we were trying to make sure that these were, for lack of a better term, arm's length transactions, and we wanted that to follow that process. Subparagraph 2 of that was the owner of the residential real property. This was the second condition under which the acquisition value would not be considered. And this is largely due to the reporting requirements in the state. So this is not changing the reporting requirements in the state. The owner of the residential real property does not submit information that is sufficient to enable the assessor to establish the acquisition value of the residential real property under subdivision 3 of this paragraph. So I'll try to summarize it. What it does, it goes to that acquisition value in 2028, in January 1st of 2028, when you purchase, and then there are conditions under which have to be met for you to get the acquisition value on your home, providing information to the county assessors to make sure that it is an appropriate transaction. And that's an amendment I would propose to this bill to make it more correct, if you will, moving toward a fair market value at time of transfer or an acquisition value.
It's been moved and seconded. Comments, discussion? You got a nervous tick down there? Let's call for the vote. Oh, never mind.
I think you got to do the amendment.
Yeah,
Yeah.
on the amendment. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Page 5. Senator Ide.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Page 5, line 5, there was a comment made by Ms. Huxtable to delete after residential land up to 35 acres. I would move that amendment. In an outside comment on that, she also had some discussion on how to deal with a ranch sale and the complexities of the structure on that. I don't want to confuse that, but I'm not sure where we go with that. If we want to try to amend this bill to put something in there, let's stick with this right now unless LSO has a comment on that.
First, Mr. Chairman, I think that change on the 35 acres is on page 7, not on page 5.
Yeah, it is.
Oh, yeah, you're right. I'm sorry. I was way ahead of myself trying to get home.
You're good, Mr. Chairman. As to how to deal with the agricultural land, I don't know that I have that answer right now, but.
Okay.
So that's an interesting question. Oh, I'm sorry. He had his hand up.
Senator Case.
Mr. Chairman, this agricultural value issue is a really interesting thing. And it's where you see situations where ranches are bought up for astounding amounts of money by sometimes very famous people that have all sorts of plans, and they spend just a buku bunch of money. We're limited to taxing the land, the agricultural land, on production value. But if it's got swimming pools and tennis courts, maybe like Beverly Hills, I don't know, then we've been able to capture some of that value. Probably not as much as we could have, but it was certainly fairer than if you say now that is going to be by this same schedule, and you're just going to pretend like that value doesn't even exist. And you'll never capture any taxes out of those folks. I would be disappointed if we did that.
Senator Ide.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Since I jumped ahead, I can withdraw that and bring that amendment again once we get to page 7, if you'd rather do that. That's your call. Thank you.
It's out there and it's been seconded. My question from the Department of Revenue, if the land's not actually being used for production, i.e. it has swim pools and tennis courts, then it doesn't get the ag exemption, does it?
Mr. Chairman, yeah, great question. So when we're valuing, I think the situation that Assessor Huxtable brought up was you have an agricultural property that includes residential structures. Could be a swimming pool, could be multiple things, right? It has these residential structures, and this ranch sells for $5 million, let's say, okay, for all the ag land and the residential structures. What the point she was making is we don't know what the residential structures acquisition value was. We know the entire acquisition value of the ag land and the residential structures. So that's where it gets complicated, because now we have a $5 million sale on this, full section with a house and a swimming pool. And now we have to somehow figure out what is the acquisition of the house. We know the ag land will continue to be valued in production, but is the acquisition of the house $5 million? I mean, that's basically what the SOC is gonna say. I bought the ranch land, I bought the house, I bought the swimming pool for $5 million. So that's what we're trying to get across here. Yes, no, currently, if that land has a swimming pool, a house, it's being valued as residential land, but it's adjacent to the agricultural land that is involved with that operation. So I think that's the point she was trying to get across, is we don't know the acquisition value of the house and the associated residential land in addition to the agricultural land.
So we're changing method of valuation. How do we deal with that now under current rules? If I buy the $5 million house, swim pool, and tennis court, how much gets applied to land in the house using fair market value?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, great question, and Senator Case brought that up. We see these ranches sell for a very large sum, right? But we're still going to value that house at fair market value. We're not worried. Most of the times, we're not going to use those agricultural sales in our market study anyway, but we're going to value the agricultural land at production, and we're going to value the house based on other sales that have happened within that area at a fair market value.
Representative Lean.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Gill. To further compound this issue, in my district, I have the infamous Pathfinder Ranch, and they have multiple homes on that ranch. Would this then put you in a precarious situation, or my assessor, in a precarious situation where she's got 3 to 5 homes on the one ranch that now needs assessed, but we aren't assessing the value, and how do we break that down?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Lean, yeah, perfect example. And a lot of ranches are like that, right? With multiple residential structures on it. So yes, if they pay one price, we don't know what the acquisition value is for each one of those homes. We just know the sales price of the entire property, whether it be producing an agricultural product or a place where you lay your head at night. We may be able to do something in rules with that, Mr. Chairman.
That was my next question. Maybe in this one case, or cases like this, we reassess the land and the houses and determine what their value are, and then start from there.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure exactly how that rule will look, but I think it's something we can do in rules. As I said, we'll be adding at least 179 pages, so why not make it 200?
Yeah, and Mr. Chairman, we are restricted by the Constitution that says that ag land will be valued on production.
Yes.
And if you need help with that language, my buddy Josh is handy.
Oh, we call Josh a lot.
Co-Chairman Locke.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and actually, I want to be clear on the amendment. And so are you proposing that we remove that Roman numeral 1, that entire section, or are we trying to reword that to be consistent with other, with the language residential real property definition in other areas? So I guess I'm asking Senator Ide as well as Mr. Anderson if that's something that you could clarify for us. Because it is true, this has happened to us 2 or 3 times in other bills, and we're trying to get to some consistency here, so.
Mr. Chairman, the way I understood the amendment was to just delete the up to 35 acres, so it would just be and any associated residential land. And Senator Ide can correct me if I misinterpreted that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and yes, that was correct. Yeah, right after the word residential on line 5, cross out the rest of that sentence, essentially on line 5. And I'm open to conversation. You're a little more the expert on this too, but it was, like you said, the consistency is important probably in everything we do. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can I offer a friendly amendment that would take this language to be consistent with what we've had before? Because it would change that 4-family to 3-family. And I'm sure Mr. Anderson and certainly the department has some language, you know, because I think we've done this 3 or 4 times probably on bills. But I would propose we go to that consistent language on this if that's a friendly amendment, sir.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Representative Lean.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be a no on this because the associated land is only 1 acre and the 35 acres allows my landowners to have a bigger tax deduction.
Okay, any other comments? Co-Chairman Locke.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and let me ask this question, because my recollection of the language that has been adopted, and again, I would ask LSO and the department on this, my recollection was that it wasn't limited to 1 acre, but in fact, it was land associated with a residence. That was my recollection of the language. Sorry. Was the language, but it was not restricted to an acreage, because I believe we've kind of been over that ground in the 35 acre and other things. So my recollection was if land is, I'll say it wrong again, but sorry, I thought the word associated was in there, so if I'm wrong, but I know that amount of land that was associated or was considered part residential land with the structure was what was there. So I did want to clarify that was my understanding. And as long as that's accurate, hopefully that's a friendly amendment. And that's what we're trying to get to. Because we were trying to, at one point, I think the 1 acre went away as well to this better definition.
Senator Ide.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Lean brings up a good point, but I think if I understood Representative Co-Chairman Locke, on that 35 acre scenario, since it's not ag land, it would be included and not just limited to the 1 acre. Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make sure of that. Thank you.
Okay, so it's been moved and seconded. I think it's been discussed. All those in favor of the amendment, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, moving on. Page 8. Representative Lucas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I actually have 2 amendments for this. Do you want them both or just one at a time so we can talk about it?
Probably one at a time.
Okay. Let's look at page 8. After line 3, I'd like to insert the following. Transfers to heirs by will or intestate succession shall not constitute a transfer, semicolon. However, subsequent sales or transfers outside the immediate family shall.
Comments? I guess we need a second first.
Second.
Comments?
We don't tax though here, so income tax.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, do you have another one?
I do. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to go on page 8 after line 18 and insert a change in more than 50% of the ownership interest of an entity holding residential real property shall constitute a transfer for purposes of this paragraph. After line 18.
Related to line 13.
Yeah, kind of.
Okay,
Yeah.
now I'm tracking. Do we have a second?
I'll second the amendment.
Okay. Comments?
Can you repeat it so I can write it down?
Certainly.
Didn't you second it?
Okay. Transfers to heirs. Oh, wait a minute. No, sorry, wrong one. A change in more than 50% of the ownership interest of an entity holding residential real property shall constitute a transfer for purposes of this paragraph.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Case?
I understand why we're trying to do this. It makes sense. I just think it still allows for daisy chain transfers. We have a business, we fix it by transferring out less than 50% on the first go. Next week, we come back and we transfer out another 50%. And you could imagine mischief. I don't know, I have a solution for that, but I'm just telling you, these kind of rules don't necessarily work.
Any other comments? Co-Chairman Locke.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can I, offer, and I'm actually asking Senator, would it be better to say if the original owner's, ownership portion falls below 51% or whatever the right number is, would that potentially address the issue? And I'm sorry, you know the nuance better than me, but I just wanted to offer that as a potential friendly amendment, if that makes sense.
I do get your point there. I'm thinking maybe the best way to do this is to limit it by time somehow. You know, have a transfer within a year. And so, yeah, then it's a new transaction and you can kind of come down on that.
I like that.
Is that a friendly change?
I think so. Friendly with my second? Yes.
We need a second. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay. Page 9. Page 10, we've already changed, right? Okay. Let's do roll call.
This is a roll call vote for 26 LSO 0101, property tax acquisition value as amended. Senator Case. Senator Dockstader.
Aye.
Senator Ide.
Aye.
Senator Pappas is excused. Representative Brown.
Aye.
Representative Campbell. Representative Lean.
Aye.
Representative Lucas.
Aye.
Representative Riggins. Representative Storer is excused. Representative Stivar.
Aye.
Representative Wharf.
Aye.
Co-Chairman Locke.
Aye.
Chairman McEwen.
Aye.
That is 11 aye, 1 no, 2 excused, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, now we're gonna move into 26 LSO 104.
Okay, if I do it now.
Yeah.
Rather than torture LSO on reading this bill, this was a property tax appeals revision bill, and I would move that we table this. I don't believe that the original concern still exists, and so I move to table.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Stick a fork in it.
Mr. Chairman, just for those that are listening, it's because Wyoming was able to retain their post office, so shout out to Harry Hageman.
Now we'll move on to 26 LSO 103.
Mr. Chairman, this is 26 LSO 103. This bill is essentially the implementation of Constitutional Amendment A. It's been referenced several times recently. So as we know, that amendment added a fourth category of property to the Constitution, and then required the legislature to designate the percent of value for that. So this, on page 2, it specifies in a new subparagraph C that residential real property would be valued at 8 3/10%, and then renumbers the all other property as from C to D. And then in bottom of page 2 provides a definition, and kind of as we've talked several times today, this would be kind of a more global definition that would be applicable unless otherwise specified. But residential real property means real property improved by a dwelling designed to house not more than 3 families and includes associated residential land where the dwelling is located. If the land is owned by the owner of the dwelling may be any type of residence, including single-family home or individual condominium unit, if the dwelling is used as a primary residence. And then again, makes a similar change to 3913-103, again, adding that fourth category of property, residential real property at 8.3%. And then on bottom of the page makes that applicable to the upcoming tax year beginning January 1 of 2026. So that's the bill, Mr. Chairman. I take any questions.
Co-Chairman Locke.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And very quickly, that definition is what we would reuse, is that correct?
I believe so, Mr. Chairman. I need to double check that it matches some of the other ones. There's been multiple versions with slight differences, but I believe that is the intent, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Lane.
Mr. Chairman, I just asked the DOR to come verify for me what the associated land means. Because in their rules, in Rules Chapter 10, Section 1, Section 3, II, 1 acre is associated with agricultural homes, and then the rest of it is ag land. So I want to make sure that I'm getting the most bang for my buck for my agricultural people, that that I'm not going to use associated land and short them 34 acres that could then be counted in the tax exemption.
Mr. Gill.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Okay, in Representative Lean's example, so you have a 35-acre parcel. 1 acre is residential and the rest is agricultural. Am I following that correctly?
The breakdown comes to, how does the DOR define associated land versus the 35-acre parcel?
Okay. So, Mr. Chairman, the associated residential, it does say that, the associated residential land, not associated ag land. So in the case where it does have a home site of 1 acre, let's say, and then the remainder is agricultural land, that, under this current proposal, that account or that property would have 2 different levels of assessment. The agricultural land would be at 9.5%. The residential land would be at 8.3 in this bill, and along with the house, the dwelling. So we would actually have 2 levels of assessment on that one property.
Representative Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to make sure that I'm following this. So with the 2 different classifications, we have ag land, and if it is not ag land, then it would fall in that associated land as being associated with the structure, correct?
Mr. Chairman, so the ag land would not fall in the associated land.
That's what I'm saying. The
Right.
2 classifications, we would have ag land on this hand, and then anything that it does not qualify as that would be land associated with that property. Is that, am I reading that correctly, sir?
Mr. Chairman, that is correct. That is correct.
I'm gonna step out on a limb here. I think the confusion is the associated land held at 1 acre? Or is it assessed by whatever it is?
Mr. Chairman, just a little history on this. So quite a few years ago, the legislature passed a law that said the land underneath support buildings, okay? So your agricultural support buildings, your barns, your outbuildings, those sorts of things that were in support of the agricultural operation, that land underneath those buildings was to be considered productive land, even though it was not producing an agricultural product, but it was supporting an agricultural product. And that is when the department put that 1 acre recommendation into our rules, that for your home site, the home site, which is the residential piece of that agricultural property, that home site shall be at least 1 acre. But we know across the state, we have home sites that are bigger than 1 acre. Like they're taking over 5 acres, let's say, for residential use and non-productive use. But it was a law change that happened in the legislature that valued that land underneath those support outbuildings that were for agricultural support, to store your tractor, to put the hay in the barn, et cetera, et cetera. Though that land was to be valued as agricultural or as productivity.
Mr. Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Gill,
Representative.
do I understand then if when the owners build their outbuilding, their barn and like this, if they build it close enough to their residence that it's less than 1 acre, then that associated land would be considered less than 1 acre, is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, I guess it could be in that situation, yes. But typically what we're looking at is, it was for those outbuildings, that law that passed, they just wanted those outbuildings to be sitting on productive land, even though the land was not producing anything. So yes, it could be smaller than 1 acre, it could be larger than 1 acre, it could be various size, for sure.
Senator Ide.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Gill. There's actually technically 2 different categories of agricultural land as well, too. One of them's production and the other one's urban ag. And I think that there's a classification of urban agricultural land that's not productive land and is taxed essentially different than ag land is. I don't know if you can comment on that or not, but I know that I've seen that before in our county zoning stuff. You have urban ag and then you have just regular productive ag. Thank you.
Sure, Mr. Chairman, Senator Ide, it has nothing to do with zoning in the valuation of the agricultural land. It's its ability to produce. So you have irrigated land, you have dry crop land, and you have range land. So there's no really urban land. Now, zoning wise, yes, absolutely, that could happen in a county. I could see that, but there's really only the three classifications, yeah.
Representative Lean.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to, I want to go to this law that encompasses the 35 acres. So if you have a ranchette and it's 40 acres, how does the DOR instruct the assessors to currently assess that land?
Sure. Mr. Chairman, Representative Lean, great question. So first of all, let's say it is a 40-acre ranchette. It has to be producing an agricultural product to even qualify as agricultural whatsoever. So it has to be producing, beef, livestock, that sort of thing, a dry crop, wheat, probably hay, in an irrigated type situation. So in most cases, those ranchettes are that whole 40 acres, they're not an agricultural operation. And they are valued as residential land at that time.
Follow up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So am I correct to understand that then that 35 acres falls under the residential category with the definition that says associated residential land up to 35 acres where the dwelling is located on the land?
So, Mr. Chairman, the 35 acres actually makes it more restrictive because that 40-acre ranchette that is not an agricultural producer, 40-acre ranchette is going to get the 8.3 on the, I'm kind of confusing a couple bills right now, but the associated residential land is, if it's all the 40-acre ranchette, it's going to be subject to that. Whereas the up to 35 acres, then that 5 acres may not be subject to that. I'm not sure exactly how we'll deal with that, but the associated residential land is a lot better than the 35 acres. As you know, the long-term homeowners had the up to 35 acres, and we ran into folks that had associated residential land that was 35.1 acres. So 35 acres got the 50% discount, and the 0.1 acre did not. So it was valued at market. So I think the 35 acres in the language that was in the long-term homeowners bill, I think that made it more restrictive, actually.
What if I'm running ostriches on my ranchette?
Mr. Chairman, I hope you run fast. Those things are mean.
But if I eat them, it's okay, right? Any other comments? What's your pleasure?
Do you want public comment, or are we done?
Oh, yeah. Anybody want to comment on this? I know what I'm doing. Okay, what's your pleasure with the bill? It's been moved and seconded. Comments? Question?
This is a roll call vote on 26 LSO 0103 residential real property taxable value. Senator Case.
Excused.
Senator Dockstader.
Aye.
Senator Ide.
Aye.
Senator Pappas is excused. Representative Brown.
Aye.
Representative Campbell.
Aye.
Representative Lean.
Aye.
Representative Lucas.
Aye.
Representative Riggins. Aye. Representative Storer is excused. Representative Stivar.
Aye.
Representative Wharf.
Aye.
Co-Chairman Locke.
Aye.
Chairman McEwen.
Aye.
That is 11 aye and 3 excused, Mr. Chairman.
Well, before we dismiss everybody, I do want to thank everyone for the last 2 days' work and everybody who's testified. This was sort of a haul, and I think we did good work, and we'll see what happens on the floor. And special thanks to Josh, who has more homework than he knows what to do with. Anybody, comments?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to thank all the assessors and all the professionals who put up with us for the last 2 days. And I know there's some very real concerns, and all the counties are different. It's a big struggle, and there's still a lot of work to do. So I appreciate very much all your help.
Echo that. Thank you all. I know you all worked very hard as well. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, yeah, just to echo that again, it's nice. I made a comment about the statistics on public employees that we have, those ratios per capita, but I truly appreciate all of our public employees, just to make that clear. It's just always looking for efficiencies. Thank you.
And if that's it, we will adjourn.